I'm Tom Vasel, and I'd like to welcome you to the Dice Tower. And what I'm doing in this series is talking about my top 100 games. Well, we've started at 100, we're working our way down. Today we're talking about games number 66 through 70. Now, 4 of these games that I'm talking about today are 4 of the first games I ever played since I started playing games as an adult. I played games my whole childhood, but there was kind of a renaissance, and 4 of these games were 4 of the ones that brought it about. But the first game I'm going to talk about, number 70 itself, is brand new this year for me, and that's Dust. Now, Dust may look like it's a fashion show on the outside, but it's actually a war game with tons of wonderful little pieces of different types. I have bags full of these pieces. There's little mechs, there's tanks, there's planes, there's boats. And when you look at the board, which is made of puzzle pieces that get put together, and you look at the rules, and you look at the dice, it's basically a game that's very similar to that of Risk. But what makes this game interesting for me is that you are using cards that have a picture on. That picture shows the special ability of the card. It also gives you how much reinforcements you have that turn, how many movements you have, how many attacks, etc. And so while the game has a similar feel to Risk because you're trying to take over the world, it works much better, not only because there's a diversification of units, but because there's strategy in which cards you play, there's strategy in which units you buy. The game has a timed system where you're getting points for controlling different areas, and it's very, very much forcing you to attack other players. So sitting around in a defensive position really won't help you much at all. Overall, that just makes it my favorite game of this genre. I got rid of Axis and Allies. I don't play Risk. I don't want to play most games like this because Dust is one of my favorites by far. And so my number 70 game, a game of conquering the world, even though you may be using supermodels to do so, is Dust. Number 69 is Citadels. Like I said, one of the first games I played, Citadels is really just a card game. And in this card game, you're trying to build different buildings that you're going to be putting down on the table in front of you. And the first person to get 8 buildings down ends the game, and then you add up the amount of points that each building's worth. But what makes this game interesting is it's one of the first games, not the first, but one of the first, to use role selection. Each turn, players will secretly pick one of these roles. Now, for example, you can see here we have the king, and the assassin, and we have the king. And these are 2 different roles that people can pick. And you don't know who's exactly who, which makes playing the assassin fun because he can kill someone. So if I'm the assassin, I can say, well, the king is dead this turn. And I'm hoping that Joe, who's winning the game, is the king, and I've killed him. The person who picks king gets to go first each turn. So each ability gives that person, each role gives that person a special ability, and then you use those abilities to get money, and with that money then to buy these buildings. And whoever gets the most points wins. Very interactive, very entertaining. I don't play it as much as I used to, and that's because my number 68 game is very similar in a sense, and it's designed by the same designer, Bruno Faidutti, and this is Fist of Dragonstones. Now, the company who made Fist of Dragonstones, Days of Wonder, this is one of the first games that put them on the map. And Fist of Dragonstones also has roles that you're able to use, but in these roles, you're bidding on them. And there's different kinds of money you can see. There's gold, fairy gold, regular gold, and then silver coins. And it's a very interesting bidding system because when you bid for cards, everyone loses all the money they bid, even if you didn't win it. Also, some of your gold, the fairy gold, you get back at the end of each round. So you have to really bid carefully. Bidding too much, but yet not enough, will cause you to lose money and you get nothing out of it. And this game has a much wider variety of roles. I go back and forth on which one of these games I like better. Some days I say, I don't know if I want to play Citadels. I'd rather play Fist of Dragonstones. Other times I say, well, Fist of Dragonstones is all fun and not, but just don't feel like playing it today. So, sometimes they might switch position in my order, but they're both really fun games. They just both remind me of each other. Even though one's an auction game, the other one is a role selection game, you both use cards with special abilities to accomplish an end. And they're both very fun for me in that regard. Number 66, I think we're at, or 67, is nowadays the reprinted version is called Primordial Soup, but my version is called Soup, and it's basically about a bunch of amoebas. Now, these amoebas are swimming around on this large board that shows different spaces. It's just a bunch of squares, basically. And your amoebas aren't really much to look at. They simply are these little squares or circles or octagons. So the shape helps differentiate. You have different colors as well as shapes. And these are moving around the board with these cubes. Now, I know some people get tired of the cube confusion of games. There's so many games of cubes. But in this game, they work really well. Because the cubes in this game are food. And as your amoebas move around, they eat the cubes of other colors and then, for lack of a better word, poop the cubes of their own color. That in itself is kind of funny. Your amoebas are moving around, eating, pooping, and then other amoebas come and eat their poop, and then eat, and that, kids think, ah, ha, ha, ha. But there's really some strategy here. And what makes the game really strategic are these gene cards that you can buy. And there's different genes that you can buy that allow your amoebas to attack other amoebas, to have a defense, to move farther, to have better control over their movement, and to live longer, to be able to divide easier. And there's a good amount of abilities, and if you buy the 5 to 6 player expansion, which I don't recommend, by the way, not playing with that many people. It's best with 4. But it gives you a whole pile more of genes to pick between. And that in itself just really brings, it's not just a humor, funny game with poop jokes, but it's also a very strategic game, and it stayed so high in my collection because of that. So, Soup, or as the modern name of it is, Primordial Soup. And then the last game I'm going to talk about today, number 66, is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, for a long time, was the #1 ranked game at BoardGameGeek.com. Just lost that position, but held it for several years, and there's a reason for that. Puerto Rico is a very well-designed game. Each player has their own player board, and basically are controlling the island of San Juan and trying to get colonists to come to their island, use those colonists to build buildings, and then use those buildings and shipping different types of goods for victory points. Now, you may think, well, you've just described lots of games. Lots of Euro games have get goods, ship goods, sell goods for points. And many of those games are kind of almost a knockoff of Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico did it best. It took the role selection that was, you can see that in Citadels, but in Puerto Rico, when you picked the role, you weren't the only person to get the ability of that role. Everybody got to do it. You just got something a little bit more special. And the game has very little luck. There's some luck in which plantations are turned over, whether sugar will be available that turn or indigo. But for the most part, there's no luck at all. And for that reason, for a while, it wasn't very high on my list because some people had analyzed this game to death. What brought the game back into one that I enjoyed quite a bit was an expansion, which added different buildings, and those different buildings kept the game from ever being in a very set manner. There was more back and forth. You never knew what selection of buildings were going to be around, so your perfect strategy that you read on the internet might not work. And I also got the computer game version of it, which I played quite a bit. The computer opponents were fairly good at the game, and so I started to play it more and more. And so Puerto Rico, the theme it works very well. I mean, it's not the most exciting in the world, but to bring the colonists over, get them working on plantations, get them working in buildings, using the plantations to produce goods that the buildings then either sell for money or ship off for victory points. Then when using that money to buy more buildings that are worth victory points, the whole package fits together very well. And so for that reason, Puerto Rico is my number 66. Interesting, it may have been #1 at Board Game Week, and it's actually #2 now, but it's my number 66. Why is that? Because Board Game Geek is wrong. There are 65 even better games than this. I mean, games that are just fantastic, and I can't believe this one's ranked higher than they are. What are these games? Tune in next time, and I'll show you some more.